Hi, I'm Mike Beliveau, and today we're back at Duelist Den, and we're going to be shooting what I would say is probably the second most recognizable Colt cartridge gun of the 19th century. And we're going to be shooting the Model 1877 double action. Now, the Model 1877 came in 3 calibers, and it had 3 nicknames. In 41 Colt, it was called the Thunderer. In 38 Colt, it was called the Lightning. And in 32 Colt, of which really a very small number, only about 200 were made, but in 32 Colt, it was called the Rainmaker. And this gun has a reputation for breaking down. And I find that kind of surprising. And the reason I do is because it was used by quite a few experienced gunfighters. And you wouldn't think they would stake their life on a gun that was a break-o-matic. But there's no doubt that they do break. I've had them break on me. I've got some theories about that I'll share with you. But what I'd like to do today, among other things, is answer the question. Was the 1877 a delicate flower that's better off staying in the hothouse? Or is it a practical gunfighting tool? So, let's go find out. The Model 1877 was a very successful gun for Colt. They sold 169,000 of them between 1877 and 1909. So it was quite a good seller. And in fact, it's kind of shocking that they sold that many with the reputation it's developed for breaking down, but they did. It was Colt's first successful cartridge firing double action revolver. And in fact, it was the first American cartridge firing double action revolver. And a lot of experts think that it was Colt's response to the Wesley British Bulldog that was being sold here and being sold very well. And Colt hated to give up the American market to his British competitors and decided, well, it wasn't, Sam Colt was already dead, but the Colt company hated to cede the American market to its British competitors for double actions. They decided to design one, and they did, which William Mason designed it, and it has very similar styling to the Colt single action Army, though the lock work is completely different. I mean, not just a little different, you know, a little double action hammer flip thrown in, no. It is a completely different lock work, and it's a lock work that Colt used on a lot of their double action revolvers, just about, I'd say, to the new Service 45 in 1898. So they might have changed over a Navy model, but basically it's got the cylinder locking lugs go in from the back of the cylinder instead of, you know, coming up into the side of the cylinder from the bottom the way they do on single actions. And just to let you know what a great system that is, nobody uses it today on any modern made guns. They went back to the bolt coming up from the bottom on all the modern made double actions that we have today. So that ought to give you a clue that might not have been the best idea that William Mason ever had, but he apparently loved that idea. And you can even see it on the prototype guns that he made for Winchester. He made some revolvers for Winchester that never saw the production floor. And they locked up like that as well. So that locking system is actually one of the weaknesses of the 1877. It works great in the 1878, by the way, because the frame is more robust. But the 1877 is actually a pretty small gun. I mean, this gun is, oh golly, probably 2/3 of the size of the single action Army. So it's got a very slender profile. The frame is very narrow, very thin. It's easily concealable, shoots fast. does a lot of great stuff. Now during this production run, the 1877 was available in factory length barrels that went from 2 inches up to 7.5 inches. Though the 4.5 inch length was probably the most popular. And then the shorter ones, the 3 and 2 inch barrel lengths, were quite popular. They were made without ejector rod housings, and they were generally called shopkeepers' specials. And they were very popular as concealed carry handguns. Now the gun came in 2 basic finishes. It came nickeled, and nickel was very popular during the 19th century because it helped to fight the corrosion of black powder fouling. And it came with a blued barrel and cylinder and a color case hardened frame, just like the 1873 single action Army. So, very similar companion gun to its big brother. Now, like I said before, the total production of these, I think I said 162,000. It was 169,849 revolvers were made total. And given its reputation for malfunctioning, a lot of them are fully functional on the market today. And, you know, there's 2 reasons for that. Reason number 1, it's not as bad as people tell you. Reason number 2, which may be more to the point, is you know, a lot of good citizens bought one of these, threw it in the sock drawer to be there for, you know, their hour of need, and that hour of need never came. So they were fired very seldom, and if you don't fire them, they don't get out of time, right? So I remember a friend of mine, when I bought this gun, which my gun was made in 1904. I bought this gun and he said, boy, if those old guns could talk, I wonder what a story it would tell. And I said, if this gun could talk, the story it would probably tell is some man bought me and threw me in a sock drawer, and I stayed there for 100 years. And one day they opened the drawer and some young woman packed everything up and sold me at a pawn shop. And that's probably the whole story of this gun. I don't suppose that this gun saw a whole lot of action because it's in really pretty good shape, but you never know. Now, this gun came in 3 calibers, and a fellow named Benjamin Kitteridge and Company, was a big firearms distributor in the 19th century. Probably the biggest in the country. And he was Colt's single biggest distributor. And old Ben Kitteridge had a way with branding. Right? It was kind of typical 19th century where marketing was really beginning to turn into quite the operation. So, in fact, Ben nicknamed these guns. So in all of his advertisements, he called the 41 caliber the Thunderer. And then the 31 caliber was the Lightning. And as I told you before, the 32 caliber was the Rainmaker, right? So that's all Ben Kitteridge. And in fact, a lot of people don't realize, because most people know that Kitteridge named these through his advertising. Colt never called them by those designations, by the way. But Kitteridge is also the one who coined the term peacemaker for the Colt single action Army. So we kind of owe the Model P to Ben Kitteridge, just like we owe the Lightning designation and the Thunderer. Now, people get a little confused because Lightning is such a common name for the 1877, because Colt actually designed a Lightning named gun, which was their pump action rifle. And that was officially called the Lightning. So when people talk about Colt Lightnings, and they mean the model 1877, it can confuse people unless you know that they're talking about a handgun versus a rifle, because Colt never called it the Lightning, but they did call that rifle a Lightning. There you go. So Colt sold a lot of these, and some of the people who bought them are people who truly knew their way around a gun. So that always makes me wonder a bit. So some of the people who owned model 1877s, we'll just run through them. Doc Holliday was one. Now, Doc has a number of verified guns. He used a model 1851 Colt Navy cartridge conversion. He had a single action army, and apparently he had a 41 caliber Thunderer as a hideout gun. So Doc Holliday, noted gunfighter, he had one of these. Billy the Kid carried a pair of the Thunderers as his main handguns. And he is believed to have had one of them on him when Pat Garrett killed him at Fort Sumter, New Mexico. Now, Pat shot him with a 7.5-inch barreled Colt single action army in .44-40, and the Kid never got off a shot. But supposedly he used his double action 41s as his main guns, and the Kid was a noted gunfighter. He might not have been the boldest gunfighter, but he had his choice of weapons, and that's what he chose. Probably the most famous guy who used model 1877s was John Wesley Harden. And everybody knows John Wesley Harden in the 1870s, racked up a huge string of killings. I mean, he was an out-and-out murderer. He was also a gunfighter, but if he could just murder you, he'd be happy to do that. He was an interesting guy, and I would say certainly a sociopath, maybe a psychopath. But he ended up being captured by Texas Rangers and went to prison for about 20 years. Got a law degree while he was in prison. Passed the Texas bar. He got pardoned, which was probably a mistake, and ended up in El Paso, where he hung out a shingle as a lawyer. And he did some legal work, I guess. He also did a lot of gambling and a lot of drinking, and maybe some improper womanizing. But he carried a 2-inch 38 caliber 1877, a Lightning, and he carried a 4.5-inch Thunderer version. Quite fancy, very nice. It was given to him as a gift. And he practiced with them all the time. I mean, his landlady witnessed him doing this, and she used to hear it all the time. He had a specially made vest, and he had holsters sewn into the vest, like shoulder holsters. And he had 2 double actions that he carried. He carried the 41 caliber 1877 Thunderer, and he carried a 44 Russian Smith & Wesson double action revolver. And he would practice with those every night. He would unload them, and he would draw and fire. And his landlady later, when reporting on that, said it sounded like typewriter keys clacking. He would shoot so fast. And he did that with both of those guns, and they didn't fall apart. So think about that. And the last guy I'm going to mention, and this is for my brethren in the UK, because you're left out of these discussions so much, but believe it or not, a fellow named Jerome Carminata, who was British, he was a very famous British lawman. He was in Manchester, and he was a city detective, and eventually he was the head of the CID for Manchester. And he carried a 38 caliber model 1877, a Lightning. And he used it in several gunfights there in the UK back in the day. So the amazing thing about him is it is reputed widely that he was one of the models for Sherlock Holmes. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle based some of Sherlock Holmes' characteristics on Jerome Carminata, because he used to go in disguise to infiltrate outlaw, criminal enterprises. He had his own group of what Sherlock Holmes would have called the Baker Street Irregulars. Most of the kids on the streets of Birmingham were informants to Jerome Caminada. So, Sherlock Holmes made use of that same sort of resource in the book. So there's a lot of similarities. So those are just some of the famous people who carried a Colt Model 1877. And I guess you would have to say that the Model 1877 is probably the best-selling unreliable revolver that was ever made by any company. So I have often thought maybe it's not as bad as people say. Now I know there's no doubt that they break down. In fact, I borrowed a friend of mine's 1877 to do a video, double action revolvers of the Old West, many years ago, probably almost 10 years ago. So I borrowed from him an 1877 and an 1878. And of course I had a Smith & Wesson. And, as soon as I started filming, the 1877 broke down. So I actually never got to shoot that one in that video. I just showed it. And like a good friend, I repaired it for him. And they are not pleasant to work on. I know a lot of gunsmiths won't work on them at all. I'm not a for-real gunsmith, but I found it unpleasant to work on. And what happened is the trigger spring broke, which is the most common breakage on those guns. And you have to wonder, if they break that often, why did guys like Billy the Kid, or certainly John Wesley Harden, who knew his way around a gun, and let me tell you, he shot his gun a lot. He used to do marksmanship demonstrations with a 41 Colt Thunderer. He would pin a playing card up to a tree and pump 5 rounds into it, double action, as fast as he could, and they would all be on the card. And he would shoot a crap load of those cards and then sign them and pass them out to everybody who was at the party. Right? So he did that at barbecues and 4th of July celebrations and you name it. So that gun got shot. And it got practiced with every night because he wanted to be as fast as he could be. And in fact, Jeff Milton, who's perhaps one of the most famous Western lawmen, he should be better known than he is, the real deal, Jeff Milton is. Jeff Milton was the chief of police in El Paso during the years that John Wesley Harden was there. He was brought in to clean up the town, which the town didn't really like. But he almost got in a gunfight with Harden. I mean, they were like nose to nose, and Harden backed down. And Milton contended that Harden was losing his nerve. But Milton did say that if it had come to the fight, that he probably would have lost. And let me tell you, Jeff Milton killed as many people as typhus. But he said that John Wesley Harden was the fastest, accurate man with a gun that he had ever met. And he met plenty of them. In his career as a Texas Ranger, he was a deputy sheriff, he was a border patrol agent, he did everything. And he said Harden was the fastest he had ever seen. And that if Harden had drawn, that Milton would probably have died. But he thought that Harden was losing his nerve since he got out of prison, which I find kind of interesting. But the fact of the matter is, Harden's guns worked. So why do so many Model 1877s break down? I think that is a great question. The action is complicated. And because the gun is small, the frame is narrow, and it has that odd locking system, it puts a lot of stress on the parts. and the frame is not really robust enough not to flex a little bit. And the same lock work in the model 1878, which is a bigger gun because it's made for 45 Colt and 4440 type cartridges, does not break down to the same extent. In fact, it's got a pretty good reputation for reliability. And by the way, our friend Ben Kitteridge, he nicknamed that one the Omnipotent, the 1878, which is another name that really didn't stick all that well. So there is a weakness in the gun. But I think the reason so many of them break down in the more modern era is simply because the guns are older and we're experiencing metal fatigue. And they've got more operating cycles on them. So I'm going to take mine out today, and I am going to shoot it, and we're going to see if it gets through the day. And I hope it does, because I don't want to fix another one. But I want to know, why did those experienced gunmen pick this gun if it's really no good? So let's see if it is any good. As I mentioned, the Model 1877 is styled very much like the Single Action Army, and in fact, it loads exactly the same way as the Single Action Army. So it's got a loading gate, it's got to be opened, put the hammer on half cock, that allows the cylinder to turn, and to load it, I'm going to put in one shell, I'm going to skip one. Now these are black powder loaded 38 Colts. I'm using a 158 grain hollow base bullet because of course the bore is 375 and the bullets are 357. And I've got about 19 grains of powder in here. So I'm going to load 5. Once they're loaded, I'm going to pull it to full cock, release the hammer, and now I am on an empty chamber. And that's because, unlike modern double-action guns, this gun has no safety mechanisms at all. There's no transfer bar, there's no hammer block, there's nothing. So let's go take it out on Evil Roy, see if we can make him ring. I missed him. Okay, well, you know what? That double action trigger pull is actually fairly sweet. I like it better than the feel of the single action trigger, which is really not bad, especially when you consider the linkage that you're going through. But double action, I was tapping old Roy in the chest. I must have put one over him, but I'm pretty pleased. So unloading the 1877 is the same as unloading a Single Action Army. You gotta open up the gate, put it on half cock so the cylinder will spin, and then you use the ejector rod to kick them out. And it does not kick them all the way out. I think if I was using the short cases, which is what they had originally for this, the 0.88 inch cases, it would actually clear them. But because I'm using using hollow base bullets, I'm using the longer case, the 1.03 inch cases. So it's just a little bit short on the ejector for those. Okay, so that's how we unload it. Well, the 1877 is a gunfighter's gun. So let's try it on Steel Steve, because he's a gunfighter's target. I mean, he is a actual full-size IDPA target rendered in steel. So let me pull on him and see how I do in a gunfight. Well, as long as Steve's not a fast shot, I guess I do okay. You can see all the smoke that this thing generates. I mean, it's just amazing what would have happened in an actual gunfight back then, especially if it was indoors. I mean, after the first shot or two, you'd have filled up a whole saloon with smoke, and nobody is going to see anything. I mean, today's getting even a little bit windy, and the smoke is still obscuring us when we're knocking out 5 rounds at a time. That's it throws a lot of smoke. I'm going to take another go at Steel Steve. I want to see if I can shoot any faster than I did, because this is really a pretty smooth trigger pull. I mean, it goes pretty well. Let me see if I can hold it better. All right, a little bit faster. I think the lesson for me is I better shoot first. Well, I'm out here in Swing City, and I've got, you know, Steel Sam and the Circle Gang out there, or Swingin' Sam, I should say, and the Circle Gang. I'm going to try to ring them all in double action mode. So let's see how I do. I missed. Well, I gotta tell you, these sights are very fine, and it's very hard to maintain your sight picture during double action mode with this thing. I mean, basically, just try to keep that front sight somewhere where you can see it, and off you go. Even with a slow fire, when I was doing the fast fire on Steel Steve, I wasn't using the rear sight at all. There was no way to do it at that kind of speed. So, you know, this is definitely, in double action mode, this is an up close and personal sort of gun. My final thoughts on the Model 1877 Colt double action revolver is it is a fine gun. Now, I've put about 50 rounds through it today, and it is still in fine fettle. It has not gone out of order. And in fact, it shoots quite well. I mean, all things considered. It's not like shooting a modern double action. The trigger pull is quite different. And it's very smooth, and it can shoot pretty fast, even if I can't. I would not have felt like I had a box of rocks if I'd been armed with this gun in the 19th century. And I can see why some serious gunfighters chose it. Because, contrary to what you might think if you've seen a cowboy action shoot, most people in the 19th century in no way would have shot a single action as fast as they do in SAS competitions. I mean, not even remotely like that. You can get off a lot of good aimed fire with this thing quickly. And if you practice enough to be proficient, like John Wesley Harden did, you can hit most anything at a reasonable distance and hit it darn fast. And that would have made this a very valuable gun. It's smaller than a Colt single action army. It could have concealed pretty well, be good for a townsman. 38 long Colt might not seem like a great round. I mean, we had a lot of trouble with the Moros in the Philippines. But you know, in the 19th century, you wouldn't have been shooting at anybody who was hopped up on meth or PCP either. And the fact is, most people don't want to get shot by anything, and getting hit with this 158 grain slug is going to ruin anybody's day. So it's not a gun that you necessarily feel bad using. I mean, it had enough power to get the job done in most circumstances. So what do I think? I think I'm glad I got this. I hope you like it too. So, you know, feel free to give me your comments, what you thought about it. What I am going to do probably in the future is I'm going to shoot it with both heel-based and hollow-based bullets and see which one shoots more accurately, shoots better. I think that'll be a good test. So I'm going to do that. I just have to cast up some heel-based bullets and size them and get into reloading. So let me know what you thought of this, what you thought of the video. If you liked it, thumbs up. It helps us with the algorithm, as you guys know. If you didn't like it, thumbs down. It's okay, but feel free to tell me why. And if you liked it, tell me that too. I love hearing it. So we like your comments. And I have not got my website updated yet. They're still working on it, but I'm going to keep you informed. So when that relaunches, I'll let you know about that. And I guess until next week, bye.